Good evening. Welcome to another edition of Focus on Hopkins County. I'm your host, Tim Thomas. We're glad you've joined us for another edition of our program, coming to you from SurfKY Studios. In the studio with us, a very, very special guest, none other than Mrs. Mary Ann Taylor, who is the Education and Outreach Supervisor for the Kentucky Commission on Human Rights, which is headquartered in Louisville, Kentucky, 332 West Broadway. They're in the Habron building, correct?
That's correct.
We're certainly glad that you've joined us for Focus on Hopkins County.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Glad to have you. You know, when we talk about the Kentucky Commission on Human Rights, what it means, the importance of it, we're still in the process, if you will, of educating people of the importance of it and what we exactly do, because it's kind of different from what people really understand. Give us an idea, what is the Kentucky Commission on Human Rights?
Well, the Kentucky Commission on Human Rights was formed in 1960 for the purpose of enforcing the Civil Rights Act. So a lot of times when the general public hears the words human rights, they think every right is a human right, and it is not. We specifically enforce the Civil Rights Act, and by doing that, there are only certain jurisdictions that we can address. For instance, we can only address employment, fair housing, financial transactions in fair housing, and issues that occur in public accommodations. Those public accommodations are places that receive federal funding. That said, a person still must be a member of a protected class before it falls within the jurisdiction of the Kentucky Civil Rights Act. So those are the kinds of questions that we would explore with a caller or with someone who came into the office or with someone who wrote in saying that their human rights had been violated. And it may be very true that their human rights have been violated, but what we would be looking for as an agency is the criteria that fits the Civil Rights Act. And then we could address their issues. If we could not address their issues, then we would want to refer them on to a more appropriate agency.
I know when we talk about human rights, and there's so many categories that falls under. We talk about disabilities, we talk about employment, we talk about housing, the fairness issue. What are we seeing here in the state of Kentucky? What are we dealing with the most?
In our areas, employment, public housing, fair housing I should say, and then public accommodations, we're looking at those protected classes. We're looking at discriminations that occur because of race, discriminations that occur because of gender, i.e. male or female, discriminations that would occur because of gender identity, discriminations that occur because of national origin, disability, age, 40 and over, and religion. Now, all of those protected classes don't fit into each category like a neat little box. For instance, in the area of fair housing, we also have the protected class of familial status. So if there's a person 18 and under that lives in that home, then that family cannot be discriminated against because that child lives there. But familial status is not a protected class in employment. So it's very particular, it's very criteria specific. You ask what are we looking at, I can say for sure that our disability cases are on the rise. People are aging, people are living longer, people are working longer, which means that's another set of employment issues. And disability seems to be the complaint that we're seeing the most, not just in the area of employment, but also in housing. People who are older, people who are disabled, need special kinds of housing. They need special accommodations. There need to be different modifications. We're seeing that we need more housing that can adequately fit the needs of a disabled person. We need more housing that could fit the needs of a disabled visitor. Mm-hmm. For instance, you may not be disabled, but I may, mm-hmm. and I want to come visit you. Mm-hmm. So you may not need your living quarters to be specifically a disabled quarter for you, mm-hmm. but I need to be able to access your home just to visit you. So that's one thing that we're just seeing a lot of increase in complaints with.
Well, when we talk about the commission and the importance of it and what we're seeing, it is a fine line as to where people be educated on what is available and what not is available. Basically, let's talk a little bit about, first of all, how many satellite commissions do you have?
Okay. At this point, we have 25 additional local commissions, and those are commissions that have been established through local city and government ordinances. It can be city-county combinations, it can mm-hmm. be just a county or just a city. We have 25 of those. We have 4 that are currently inactive. Mm-hmm. We have field reps out there trying to get them going again, which means getting the administrations to appoint mm-hmm.
Commissioners.
And they address almost everything that we do.
Mm-hmm.
What they cannot do is investigate.
Mm-hmm.
They may have investigative powers per their city-county ordinance, but they may not have a budget that would support that activity. So most of them end up referring cases to us mm-hmm. because we do have the staff and we do have the resources to go ahead and investigate a case and, if necessary, to litigate it at the end process. So our local commissions are valuable to us. There are feet on the ground. There are ears on the ground. They can keep us abreast of what's going on out in the state and let us know when we need to get out there and do even more training, especially more sensitivity kind of training as new employers come into the state to help them understand that we do exist and our purpose is to make sure that there are no discriminations occurring in this place of employment. So we truly, truly value our 25 local commissions.
What is the difference between Kentucky Commission on Human Rights and, let's say, the NAACP?
That's a very good question. I think the difference is the NAACP is more of, well, originally was more of a grassroots organized entity that now has national recognition, whereas we have national recognition, but we also have a legal team just like they do now. So they have attorneys, we have attorneys. They have to go to court, though, to fight their cases. When we have a case and we make a decision on it and a commissioner like you and our 11 commissioners vote upon that case, then that carries the weight of law. We're done. We don't have to go to court at that point. We only go to court if the complainant decides that they're unhappy with their decision, they want to appeal the decision, or if our respondent, someone who's had a charge against them, wants to appeal your decision, then it goes to circuit court and it's out of our hands. Whereas the NAACP, or a group like that, is they can be more of an advocacy group up front. On the front end of our investigations, we're as neutral as we can be. Our job is to find the facts. What actually happened? Did this discrimination occur? If we determine that it did, and we have enough evidence to move it to our legal department to pursue, then we become an advocate. With the NAACP, they are able to be advocates for victims immediately. So a lot of times people will go to them first, but the NAACP will send them to us and say, let's work with the Commission on Human Rights. They're our partner as well. They have different types of resources. They can actually investigate, at an on-the-ground level without having to bring in other folks from out of state.
That makes that really clears up, because sometimes people get the two somewhat mixed up. Give us an idea, when someone calls the Human Rights Commission, what is the process?
When someone calls, sometimes we actually go through a de-escalation phase because if they call, then they feel like something bad has happened to them, and injustice has, been served upon them. It could be losing a job, it could be losing a child, it could be losing a home, it could be you've been denied a service.
And let me interrupt you, because a lot of times people get the commission, they have this phobia in their mind that this is a black organization. This is not what it's about. We serve people across the board.
Everyone. One thing I like to tell people all the time is, at some point in your life, if you at least live to be 40, you will be a member of a protected class that we serve. Your race, you have a race, like it or not. You have a gender, like it or not. You may have a disability, but even if you don't have a disability, if someone perceives or assumes that you do, you could be discriminated against because of their perception. If you live to be 40, in Kentucky, the age of discrimination is 40. So national origin, you came from somewhere.
That's right.
So everyone, regardless, black, white, green, blue, orange, at some point in their life is a member of a protected class. The Civil Rights Act has a set of protected classes, and everyone at some point will fall into those. So we do. We're here for Kentuckians. We're here for people who live in the Commonwealth, regardless of what they look like, regardless of their race. Right. Our job is to advocate for them. But you ask, what happens when they call?
Yes.
Okay. There are several ways to get in touch with us. You can send us an email. You can go to our website. There's some forms you can complete and send to us, and we will look at them. You can walk into our office, or you can call. Someone calls, and as with any agency, there's a set of papers we must complete. So we do what's called an intake, which is basically a question and answer session. There's a couple of things that we have to know up front to know if we can help you. One, are you within the statute of limitations in terms of time frames? Did this happen within 180 days? Or if it's a housing issue, has it been less than 300 days? That tells us up front, before anything else happens, if we can help you, because the law says there's a statute of limitations. You pass that milestone, then we want to know, are you a member of a protected class? If you don't meet those two criteria, we still can't do anything. And then we will get into what actually happened. And that's probably the most important thing, what actually happened. Oftentimes, very, very bad things happen on the job. Bad things happen in your home. Bad things happen in public. Just because they're bad doesn't make them illegal. And it doesn't make them fit the criteria of what's a violation of the Civil Rights Act. So when we get that information, we determine that we have jurisdiction. And then we send them an affidavit to get signed and notarized and back to us. Most cases have the opportunity to be mediated first. If mediation fails for either party, then it is bumped up to an investigator, and that's when we start this fact-finding phase. Some cases can take 2 months, some cases could take almost 2 years, because we want to be thorough, and we want to be fair, and we want to be neutral. So we can't just immediately take a side and say, this is it, we're going to litigate it. It will come down to a decision of what's called probable cause, meaning there is enough evidence to substantiate this claim, or non-probable cause. And at that point, those decisions go to our 11 commissioners. You're one of those. And they read through those cases and determine that, yes, we did do a good job. Occasionally, commissioners find something we missed and say, nope, take it back. We need to be absolutely sure about this decision. And we do. Once the commissioners vote on a case, then that's it. There's a 10-day reconsideration period. And if a case comes up to be reconsidered, our clients can ask us to do that. We look for new evidence. Is there anything new? Is there anything different? Is there information you didn't tell us? Is there a witness that didn't want to testify before that wants to talk to us now? And then it goes through the same process again. It's either a probable cause or a non-probable cause. If it is a probable cause, then it goes to our legal department, and then they pursue litigating. The whole time there's an opportunity to go back and mediate again. At that point, we call it a conciliation. A lot of places, a lot of people find that conciliation is a little bit more palatable, a little less expensive, and it just makes for better community relations. Let's just conciliate this case. Let's get our folks trained. Let's make sure we don't make the same mistake again. Those are usually the grounds of a conciliation. Sometimes there are monetary outcomes for the complainant. And sometimes they're not. Sometimes the person just wants their job back. Sometimes they just want the dignity that they feel, been infringed upon back. So it really just depends on the attorneys and the complainants at that point. But that's what happens when a case comes to us, or when someone calls.
Wow, that's interesting, because I think people need to realize and know exactly what is available and how the process works. I know a lot of times when the people call, they want something done quick fix, but nothing is quick fix anymore.
Exactly.
It takes time to go through it. How many people do you have that does the investigation? How many investigators are there?
At this point, we have 7 investigators. We do have at least one investigator who is dedicated solely to housing cases, and then the other 6 handle employment and public accommodations. They may at some point, if necessary, handle some of the housing cases, but right now we have a dedicated housing investigator, and then we have the other 6 doing employment and public accommodations. So there is no quick fix. One thing that I am really proud of when it comes to our staff is we know that, and we let people know that up front. We also are very cognizant that we can't fix everything. And sometimes we know that a person needs help, but they've come to the wrong place. And we will go out of our way to find the appropriate place for them and guide them to the right agency as someone who can help them.
There is a statute of limitations.
Yes.
That sometimes people don't realize after things have happened so long. Give us an idea about that.
If it's an employment or a public accommodations case, then they have 180 days or 6 months to report it to us. If it's a housing case, they have 300 days to report it to us. So they have almost a year if it's a housing incident. If it is beyond 180 days, we can still help that person by sending it on to EEOC, which is our federal partner. We contract with them, but they can take a case that's 300 days old if it's an employment case. So we encourage folks to go ahead and call us. But as you said, there's no quick fix, and we often have to keep before folks, it may have taken you 3 months to call us about something that happened 3 months ago. So if there's been a 3 to 6 month period for a person to gather up enough courage, and it does take courage to call and complain about somebody else, you have to understand it might take just as much time for us to validate your call and to validate your claims.
Yeah, so people kind of have to realize that there is a time limit on a lot of these issues.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
John J. Johnson, who is the executive director, a civil rights icon. Give me a little synopsis of John Johnson and your thoughts of him and the work that he has done down through the years.
Wisdom. Sometimes we don't know if we respect him in a fatherly way, a grandfatherly way, or a brotherly way. But I've had the opportunity to work with him now for 8 years. And his wealth of knowledge and experience is, I think, what I admire the most. It's just so interesting to maybe just sit and go through his list of contacts and just look at all the people he actually knows in the civil rights world. People that he has a personal relationship with, folks he can pick up the phone and call and say, hey, this particular issue is going on in Kentucky. What do you think? Do you want to come down? So that's a valuable asset. He's been in this fight for human and civil rights a long time. He's vested I think it's more than just a job to him. It's a life to him, and I think it has been his life. And
I think that's what keeps him going.
I know that's what keeps him going. Yeah, and I think he portrays that to the staff, just the importance of the work we do.
Moving on, and one of the cases that are not a case, but some of the things that we're seeing across the state of Kentucky, the Confederate flags. We talk about the Jefferson Davis statue, Miss Rowan. Some of those issues that are out before us now that we see. Can you kind of expound a little on that?
Everyone has rights. I can say that it is not always in anyone's best interest to put forth a personal opinion, particularly in our line of work. If someone was to call and complain about another person or another entity's actions, such as having a statute in a particular place or carrying a flag in a particular place or flying it on your car or whatever, I would want to treat them, and our agency would put them through the same rigorous intake that we would anyone else. What was the negative action that occurred because of it? Have you been negatively impacted? Have you lost a job? Have you been denied a service? So what is your complaint? Are you within the statute of limitations? You know, some folks would say you're playing it safe, you're not really taking a stand, but in our agency, our stand is to eradicate discrimination. And it comes in many forms. We just recently had a push to have that statute removed. It failed, so it did. It went through the process, and that was the outcome of the process.
And that's usually what it's about, you know, basically.
Now, do we give up? Some will, some won't. It will go through the process again, and the next time the outcome may be different.
What would you like to see in the next few years with the Kentucky Commission on Human Rights? What would you like to, what do you envision? I
envision the Human Rights Commission being known across the state in such a way that people just come to us in droves for training, which is, you know, primarily my department, that people understand the necessity of preventive training. Let's train our staff, let's train our organization, let's train our realtors, let's train our landlords on the front end so that we don't have to conciliate them on the back end. I want us to be known enough that even if you're not sure you have something, you're not sure you have a case, you're not sure something happened, you're about to make a decision, we should be the agency that you are comfortable to call and say, hey, I'm about to do this, am I okay? Or am I gonna, you know, have a complaint filed against me? Or we should be the agency that you can call and say, this just happened to me. What do you suggest I do? And at that point we can say, you know, you have something, you might want to file a complaint with us, or we can send you to an appropriate person.
And that's possible. I mean, I think that's something that's important to try to do. Correct. Legal team, we have, what, 2 legal? How many do we have on our legal unit?
We have 2 attorneys and a legal secretary in the unit.
And kudos to our legal.
They are awesome.
Keith Durr and Alicia
Robbins,
who I just love. She is definitely on point as well.
Yeah, they both are assets to the agency. We absolutely could not do the work that we do without them. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the educational part of the commission. I know that hangs with you solely, and getting the word out, educating people about the Human Rights Commission. And there are still some out there that don't understand, and that's why we wanted to focus in on that today. The importance of it and the need to call, even at the perception of something may be wrong. There's a need to call.
That's when we really rely on those 25 local commissions that we talked about earlier. That's why it's so important. I mean, the ideal situation would be to have a local commission in all 120 counties. And then we would have eyes and ears and feet everywhere. But we don't. So we do rely heavily on those 25 that exist right now. So there are still pockets of Kentucky, not even in small rural towns, but even in some of our largest cities that just don't know about us, don't know what we do, have a misperception of who we are when they hear that we enforce the Civil Rights Act, and they think, okay, well, that is just for people of color. And it's just a lack of knowledge. So there's always some kind of media, as you know, campaign.
Sure.
As funding becomes available, that's the first thing we do is we try to get ads in newspapers. We try to get in people's programs, you know, whether it's a banquet program or whether it's a conference program. We want to get our name out there and our mission out there and just what it is we do. Billboards, the fair housing signs that we've put up in 12 different cities. The key is just going to be exposure, exposure, exposure. It's just, I think even in the smallest rural town in Kentucky, folks might know who the cats in the cards are. Okay, we need that kind of name recognition.
Sure.
So my goal as the head of that education outreach department is to make sure that you associate us just like you do the cats, the cards, the hilltoppers, or the colonels.
Yeah.
So that's going to be the key, is just continue to get our name out there. You know, sometimes word of mouth. Just word of mouth, you know, I had this happen and this is who, or I had this happen and they weren't able to help me, but they were very good about what they could do. And that's where we want to be.
Right. Here in Madisonville, Hopkins County, what are some of the issues that you have seen or that has been coming through from this area?
From this area, this county, I don't want to be too county specific because it's just so sensitive, and there are open cases that we're not at liberty to discuss. But as with most counties, there's tons of employment issues, a lot of questions, a lot of people who may want to be in particular positions and are not, and they feel very strongly that they're not because of a particular type of discrimination, whether it's race or national origin or disability. I think our biggest concern in Kentucky, but also here in Western Kentucky, has been the amount or the increase of bullying that we've seen. In our schools, in our middle and high schools, and that's on the rise. It's alarming, and we have been in touch with at least who we know to be the appropriate people to deal with that at the state level and especially at the local level. So our goal right now is to actually get into some of these school systems, do some sensitivity training with staff. You know, everyone brings their own frame of reference to the table. And if your frame of reference has been pretty limited and suddenly you're in a building with 2,000 students from all walks of life, it can be just as difficult for those teachers and administrators as it is for the students themselves. So we really, really need to get into those buildings and start working with the adults and the kids, just on sensitivity and just what diversity really means and what it means to embrace that, not just tolerate it, but to actually embrace it and understand that you are a part of it. You really are a part of it.
Yes.
So, but I'm just seeing a lot of that and all over the state, but I've seen that here in Western Kentucky. The bullying. And unfortunately, a lot of the bullying is based on race. Yeah, or perceived race.
Yes.
Perceived race.
Right. The fairness issue, we're close running out of time, but the fairness issue, what are we seeing with that?
Well, we're seeing that we have 8 counties here in the state that have adopted ordinances to protect folks based on their their gender identity or their sexual preference. That is not a statewide law. It is not a protected class. However, we do all that we can to advocate and put folks with the right agencies that can.
We've been talking with Ms. Mary Ann Taylor, who is Education and Outreach Supervisor for the State Kentucky Commission on Human Rights. And we hope you'll tune in to our next program. Thanks to our sponsors. Thanks to each of you. I'm Tim Thomas. By all means, keep sharing the dream.